Welcome to the Webinar Hacker Podcast with me, Diego Laje. Today we're getting strategic about audience growth and magnetic webinar topics with Tim Ito, co-founder of Clarify Media and veteran leader in digital content and education strategy. Tim's insights pull from decades shaping industry conversation at LinkedIn, the American Management Association, and more. If you want to pinpoint what truly resonates with your audience and master the art of selling your expertise before your product, this episode is packed with actionable insight you won't want to miss. Let's dive in. Tim, thank you so much. Great having you. We're going to discuss which are the drivers to find your best audiences and to find the best topics that will appeal to your audiences. Where do you start from, right? Many webinars, many people organizing webinars just find this too big a topic. What is the first step that will probably put you in the right track?
It's a good question. There's no real method or science to this whole thing, but I think what you can do is certainly take a look at your analytics and take a look at, for example, you produce content on a regular basis, right? You do blogs and you can see which ones are really popular. You can do videos and see which ones are resonating the most. Or maybe there's a topic that keeps coming up over and over and over again when you're posting in social or doing something like that. And you might start thinking to yourself, well, maybe this is a good topic because people are asking about this, or, if there's something that people are continually trying to figure out, hey, I'm trying to figure out this thing, and you get that kind of feedback. That's where feedback, analytics, and data can really help you choose a really good topic for whatever webinar it is you decide on.
And you see, there's a leap going from your post, and most likely the posts that viralize better tend to be videos or very short texts, right? In both cases, the information is like shady or incomplete, right? The video talks about a lot of things and you never know exactly what resonated, or the tweet probably was too short and you don't know which the point is too small to give you a line,
right?
So I'd like to get a sense of how you work your trial and error here before betting all into one topic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because, whenever you produce a piece of content, you're probably not 100% sure that it's about that thing, that's the reason they came in. I think one of the other things you can do that we didn't mention in the previous answer is, the data is available out there of what people are looking for and searching for too. So one of the things that you can do is certainly, if you run ads, or even if you don't, you can get access to what's called the keyword planner in Google. And you can get a sense of what the volumes are for particular things. A lot of the keyword volumes revolve around questions, right? And it could be, let's say you're a company that, you do water treatment to prevent Legionella, right? You can figure out what's the volume of people searching for Legionella and Legionnaire's disease. You can figure out what's the volume of people searching for things about Legionella and cooling towers, or and that's just a specific B2B example, but that data exists for almost every industry, basically. The only ones that it doesn't is for, certain industries like the sex industry and other things where you can't really get that data from Google. But other than that, it's all pretty much publicly available to you. You just have to know kind of where to access it and where to look for it. That can help you confirm what it is that you're seeing in terms of popularity. Because if you have two sources that kind of say, oh yeah, I did two things on this, and the data backs up what people are really searching for, I think you can go into a webinar with pretty good confidence.
And that is probably when you get started, right? But after some time, you've ran a few, you talk to people, you interact with them. I'd like to get a sense of how you recommend, what is the best practice for interaction with your attendants, these people, you kind of have something in common because they're in your webinar, but you don't really know. It's not the same as when you visit a customer, right, in their offices, right? Um, which is the best way that you guys leverage that information and that interaction in webinars?
So during the webinar itself is what you're asking,
During
right?
the webinar itself and later, yes.
And later, yeah, I think, for example, like we host webinars for a lot of our clients, and sometimes there's a particular point that gets brought up that it's worth, and this is where I think, what we always tell clients, the most important thing in marketing is paying attention to little details, because sometimes your success in
Interesting.
marketing really hinges on you kind of latching onto the one thing that maybe people were bringing up and then saying, hey, there were a lot of questions about this particular point that we brought up in the webinar. And, also you can see who's commenting, and like, it's worth it for any company that's hosting a webinar to take notes on who's doing the commenting, because, and if there are questions, especially the ones you don't get to, they ask people always ask a bunch of questions and you only have time to answer 5 of them. So
Yeah.
usually what happens is, like, you get an opportunity to follow up, but make sure that you take down the different questions, even the ones you didn't answer, because then you can follow up with them from a sales perspective or from other perspectives. You can give them answers, but also then follow up and say, hey, if you're interested, we provide this product or service that's in your area, that's in the area or the topic that we kind of presented on the webinar. And that's actually allows you to kind of smoothly interject that sales question into basically what is essentially a content answer.
You're touching on something super interesting, that is the eternal problem of the business event and the webinar, right? Where does the education end and where does the sales pitch start,
Right.
right? And uh, I'd like to know if, with the work you do with your clients and the companies you help, how do you go about that, especially when you're attracting people, right? Leveraging specific keywords. So there is an expectation that they will be sold something, but
Right.
where's the line, or how do you try to navigate this?
It's a great question. I think generally what we tell the client, and if they're going to ask our opinion, what we generally believe the webinars are for is to demonstrate your authority and expertise. That's really it,
Mm.
right?
That's interesting. Sorry, could we expand on this a little bit more?
Sure.
How do you do it? Because despite some people use webinars as a platform to sell or teach, not to establish expertise per
Yeah.
se. So could you expand a little bit on that?
So if we have to kind of go back and sort of the theory of marketing generally, and I don't want to go too deep, but I think
No, no, of course.
what basically you're trying to do in marketing is, we sort of call it a 4-step process, right?
Mhm.
You hook somebody, so you interest them in a particular topic. You convince them of what that is that you're trying to sell to them. You convert them, so there's a whole bunch of processes for that, and then you try to evangelize them and say, hey, like, wasn't that great? You should talk about it with your audience. Now,
Yeah.
during the part that's the convince part, right? Part of what you do in that part is you try to establish yourself, regardless of what you're selling, right? You could be selling anything. You're trying to establish yourself as that part of the funnel. You're trying to establish yourself as the expert in the space. And the more that you can do that, the more people are going to look at you and go, God, I need that. I need that service, or I need that product that he sells, because they really know what they're talking about. You could be talking about any industry, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what a lot of people try to do is they skip that step. They say, oh, I hook somebody, and then, you know what, I'm going to just sell them. You're not even, so you're trying to convert them. In other words, you're missing a step in the funnel, which is you have to convince them that you are it. And that is a big part of it. And so I wouldn't be necessarily rushing to try to sell somebody in a webinar per se, right? Unless they know that's really that is what you're doing. You're doing a demo, which is fine, right? You
Yeah.
come in there providing a demo and then you're selling them directly. That is understood. But if it's an educational thing that you're doing, right? The most important thing I think personally is that you're selling your expertise. You sell your expertise, they get on your list, you eventually nurture them into a close because they won't be able to do without your expertise. And I think that's a different mindset than going in and then providing an educational webinar and then selling them directly, right? That's not the process. The process is really, we all choose things based on who we think the expert is in the space, right? We want an expert to take grass stains out of our jeans. We're going with Tide. They established their expertise in this space, right? It's no different if you're talking B2C, B2B. It's the same thing.
I see. And this is interesting. You establish your expertise. This, which would be the 2 or 3 suggestions you'd have for a customer, and then we go back to the analytics, right?
Right. I think that the way to establish your expertise is that we often say this: you have to say something. And what I mean by that is you can't just say the same thing someone else says. It's not, then you're not really standing out, right? If you stand out, you have to take a stand, you have to say something, or you have to creatively take one concept and apply it to your situation, right? That's what we call that in our field, is we call that social currency. You tell somebody something they don't know, and then they hear it and they go, wow, I didn't know that. And then they pass it on to somebody else. So they look smarter, more interesting, funny, the whole thing, right? That's part of it. So that's one way to do it, right? You establish your authority by being able to creatively put things together. And I think that's what a lot of companies don't really get about marketing, is that there's the reason why creativity works is because it establishes you as this really thoughtful, interesting company, right? Yeah. And a lot of companies sort of skip that piece of it, but it's really important, especially in B2B. And then as far as your second question was, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, your second question. I now I'm forgetting what your second question was.
No, because then there's this other step where you are original, right? You want to come up with something new. Your product, your service, your software, your technology, whatever, really solves a problem. You put a lot of work into really solving a problem.
Yes.
And then you have to bridge that gap between what you sell, be that a service or product or software or whatever, and these hooks, analytics, topics that your target audience discusses online. Right. And in a way, I've discussed it with many people trying to do this. And I'd like to get your take, because in a way, it's bringing this original thing into a very flat conversation that is going on around the solution.
Right.
So how do you make that conversation shine?
It's maybe one of the hardest things in marketing, but I would say this: there's an idea in that you can create demand. So for example, if you have a new product and service, right? Nobody knows it. Nobody knows what you sell. Nobody knows what it does. Nobody knows its connection to this solution, right?
Yeah.
It may even be something that no one's tried to solve for before, right? Nobody even knew they had this issue. The iPhone, right, is a great example, right? Nobody knew they needed an iPhone, but now everybody does, right? So part of what that is the idea of, can you create demand around something? Can you make something really sexy, right? Really, really, people really want it for that reason. This Starbucks, nobody knew they needed a $5 cup of coffee, right? But now we all do, right? Well, some of us do.
Yeah, we all do. We all do.
Yeah, right. We all do. And I think some of that is just like figuring out what are those little triggers that you know about your audience, and creating, and you have to what you're doing is you're just putting a constant drumbeat out in the marketplace, right? Of a consistent brand or a consistent product service that puts it out there, that makes it look a particular way or feel a particular way or does a particular thing for you. And you just keep reminding people of that, right? If you do that, at some point, there will be people who say, oh, I need that. Like, I'll give you an example. The other day I was scrolling through my crazy feed and social, and there was there was a product. It was this moon pod, and it showed somebody flipping back on this, like, it was like a little couch, almost like a little love seat type thing, but it was like a
Yeah.
fluffy pod thing. And it showed somebody just flopping on it and kind of relaxing and how comfortable it was. And I had no desire to I had no upfront need for any such thing, but I was like, wow, that looks really interesting. I think I'm going to take a look at it. And, I almost bought it. It was too expensive, though, frankly, but it would have been one of those things, though, that if it were slightly cheaper, I would have taken the plunge. And I'm sure a lot of people did too, because it made it look like something I needed, if that made sense. And it fit all those analytics, like what people were looking for, but it was something new. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to kind of, there's an art to this in some ways, right? And that's the hard part of marketing too, is that sometimes there's just a little bit of an art to trying to figure out what it is, that thing that's really going to resonate with people. So.
And it's pure communication at this point. The engineering part is completely,
right.
It's a given. It's taken as a given, not as a component.
And it's not I think the one thing that happens, particularly because I know one of the focus areas is B2B, right?
Yeah.
In B2B marketing, I think there's a tendency to say, here's our feature set. Right, here are the features of our product or service.
Yeah,
that's all fine. You want to make sure people understand those things. But what sells any product or service is never the feature set. It's the emotion around how it makes what it's going to do for me, right? If that makes sense. How it's going to make my life easier. How it's going to make me feel at the end of the day, right? Those are things, even in B2B marketing, those are the things that you sell. Like the feature set, okay, right? It's the other things, it's the emotional things that it really is what people latch on to. And that's why, emotional campaigns tend to do a little bit better, even in the B2B space.
That ties in perfectly with something we repeat over and over at the Webinar Hacker. You sell to people buy, Coca-Cola or Apple, they don't buy. It's the purchase manager who is, John Smith in Coca-Cola who actually decides to buy your product or service.
Absolutely. And these are individuals who your product in some way is helping those buyers in an emotional stand. Like somehow they are helping buyers emotionally with whatever that is, right? Whatever challenge, pain point they have, your software, your product, your whatever it is you're selling does help them.
Team Ito, super clear as usual. Great having you. Thank you so much.
It's nice being on, Diego. I appreciate it. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Start with data and feedback. Leverage analytics, feedback, and keyword research to choose webinar themes that match your audience's interests. Establish and demonstrate expertise. Use webinars to showcase your expertise and original insights. Don't just sell or repeat what everyone else says. Stand out by offering unique solutions. Engage and follow up for impact. Track attendee questions and engagement during and after the webinar to personalize follow-ups, build relationships, and improve future content. Don't forget to follow the Webinar Hacker. Share this episode with your network and hit subscribe for more expert insights every time. Your support helps us reach more professionals who want to command the digital stage, just like you.